Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The tension in Genoa City reached a fever pitch the moment Holden's fist connected with Kyle's jaw. It wasn't just a punch, it was an explosion of every secret, every lie, and every moment of betrayal that had been simmering beneath the surface. Kyle stumbled back, his eyes wide with shock and confusion as Holden's words sliced through the air like a blade. "You lied," Holden roared, his voice trembling with fury and heartbreak. The entire room seemed to freeze, the sound of his heavy breathing the only thing that filled the silence. Phyllis, who had been standing nearby, gasped, while Summer covered her mouth, horrified by what she was witnessing. But the real shock came with Holden's next words that no one saw coming. "Claire is my wife," he shouted, his voice raw with anguish. In that moment every lie, every manipulation, every hidden truth finally came crashing down, leaving everyone reeling in disbelief. Kyle was too stunned to speak. His cheek burned from the impact of Holden's punch, but it was nothing compared to the fire that erupted inside him as he processed what Holden had just said. Claire. His wife. That couldn't be true. Kyle's mind raced, trying to make sense of the chaos unraveling before him. Claire had told him everything, or so he thought. She had claimed she was new in town, that she had no strings attached, that she wanted a fresh start. Kyle had believed her, trusted her, even defended her when others questioned her motives. But now, as Holden stood before him, his face red with fury, Kyle realized he had been living inside a web of lies, and Claire had spun it perfectly. The air between the two men crackled with tension, each of them breathing hard, each waiting for the other to make the next move. Phyllis, always the one to sense when something monumental was happening, stepped forward, her voice low but firm. "Hold on a second," she said, glancing between them. "What do you mean Claire is your wife? That can't be true." Holden turned to her, his jaw clenched. "It's the truth," he said, his tone bitter. "We were married before she ever came to Genoa City. We had a life together, a home, plans, everything. And then one day she disappeared. No note, no message, nothing. I searched for her for months, thought she might be dead. Then I see her here in this town acting like she's someone else, like she's never even met me. And now I find out she's been cozying up to Kyle." His glare shot back to Kyle. "You stole my wife." The accusation hung heavy in the air, and for a moment, no one dared to breathe. Kyle shook his head slowly, his voice cracking as he finally spoke. "I didn't know," he said, the words barely above a whisper. "She never told me. I swear to you, Holden, I had no idea she was married, to you or anyone." But Holden wasn't convinced. His anger was too deep, his pain too raw. "Don't you dare lie to me," he spat. "You think I don't see what's going on? She's been playing you just like she played me. And you?" He jabbed a finger into Kyle's chest. "You let it happen. You believed every word she said because you wanted to." Kyle's expression darkened, his guilt quickly turning into defensiveness. "Don't put this on me," he snapped. "If what you're saying is true, then Claire is the one lying to both of us. Maybe she had her reasons. Maybe she was running from something, or someone." The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as every word added fuel to the fire. Summer could no longer stay silent. "Holden, please," she said softly, stepping between them. "If what you're saying is true, then Claire needs to explain herself. But fighting won't fix anything." Holden's eyes softened just slightly as he looked at Summer, but his anger quickly returned when he turned back to Kyle. "He knew," he muttered. "He had to know." Phyllis, ever the instigator when it came to chaos, folded her arms and smirked slightly. "Well, this just got interesting," she murmured. "Claire's been full of surprises lately. Maybe she's been hiding more than just a marriage." Kyle rubbed his jaw, still feeling the sting from Holden's punch. His mind was spinning. He remembered every conversation he'd ever had with Claire. Every moment they'd shared, every look, every promise. Could she really have been lying all along? The thought made his stomach twist. "No," he said to himself, almost in disbelief. "She wouldn't do that. Not to me." But even as he said it, he wasn't sure he believed it. Holden saw the doubt flicker in Kyle's eyes and let out a bitter laugh. "You still don't get it, do you?" he said. She's not who you think she is. She fooled you just like she fooled me. You think she loves you? She's using you. She's been using both of us. Meanwhile, across town, Claire sat alone in her apartment, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling as she tried to steady her breathing. She knew the truth would come out eventually, it always did. But she hadn't expected it to happen like this. Not with Holden confronting Kyle. Not with her past crashing into her present so violently. She had wanted a clean slate, a new beginning, a life that wasn't haunted by mistakes and heartbreak. But now everything was unraveling. She could still hear Holden's voice in her head, the last argument they'd had before she left. He had begged her to stay to work things out, but she couldn't. Their marriage had been built on lies and pain, and she had needed to escape. What she hadn't expected was to find herself falling for someone new. Someone like Kyle, who made her believe she could start over. Back at society, Kyle's frustration boiled over. "You think I wanted any of this?" he shouted at Holden. "You think I like being lied to? I cared about her. I still do. If she's your wife, then why isn't she with you? Why did she leave?" Holden's expression shifted from anger to sadness, his voice breaking slightly as he replied. "Because she couldn't face what she'd done. Because she thought running away would fix everything. But it didn't. It just made everything worse." Kyle stared at him, trying to read the truth in his eyes. For the first time, he saw the pain beneath Holden's fury. The heartbreak of a man who had lost the woman he loved and now had to face the fact that she'd moved on with someone else. Summer exchanged a nervous glance with Phyllis. "This is going to blow up," she whispered. Phyllis nodded, her eyes gleaming with a mix of intrigue and concern. "Oh, it already has," she replied. "And something tells me this is only the beginning." Holden took a deep breath, his anger giving way to exhaustion. "I didn't come here to fight," he said finally. "I came here for answers. I deserve to know why she did this, why she pretended like I never existed." Kyle, despite everything, nodded in agreement. "You're right," he said quietly. "We both deserve answers. But maybe we should get them from her, not each other." That night, the tension hung heavy in the air as Claire received a knock on her door. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw who it was. Kyle stood there, bruised and solemn, and beside him was Holden, his expression unreadable. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Kyle! Holden!" she whispered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" Kyle's eyes locked onto hers. "We need to talk," he said simply. Claire's gaze darted between them, panic rising in her chest. "Please," she began, "I can explain." But Holden cut her off. "Then start talking," he demanded. "Tell him the truth, Claire. Tell him who you really are." Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized there was no escaping it now. "I never wanted to hurt either of you," she said, her voice cracking. "Holden, I left because I couldn't live that life anymore. You know what it was like, everything fell apart. I was drowning and I needed to get away. I didn't plan to meet Kyle, it just happened. He made me feel like I could be someone new. Like I wasn't trapped by my past anymore." Kyle's face softened slightly, but the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. "You could have told me," he said quietly. "You should have told me." Claire nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. I was afraid. I thought if I told you the truth, I'd lose you." Holden scoffed bitterly. "And instead, you lost both of us." The silence that followed was deafening. Each of them stood there, broken in their own way, Holden consumed by betrayal, Kyle torn between love and anger, and Claire, crushed under the weight of her own choices. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Claire whispered, her voice trembling. "I just wanted to start over." Kyle shook his head, stepping back. "You can't start over by pretending the past doesn't exist," he said. "It always catches up with you." Holden turned away, running a hand through his hair. "You lied to both of us, Claire," he said, his voice heavy. "And now we all have to live with that." As the night dragged on, the three of them sat in uneasy silence, the truth finally laid bare between them. There was no fixing what had been broken, not tonight, maybe not ever. Holden eventually stood up, his expression weary. "I'm done chasing ghosts," he said quietly. "You made your choice, Claire. Just don't expect me to forget what you did." He left without another word. the door closing behind him with a finality that made Claire's heart ache. Kyle stayed behind for a moment longer, looking at her with a mixture of sorrow and disbelief. "I wanted to believe in us," he said softly. "But how can I, when everything we had was built on a lie?" Claire reached out to him, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "Goodbye, Claire." When he left, Claire sank to the floor, her sobs filling the empty apartment. Everything she tried to build had come crashing down, and she had no one to blame but herself. Across town, Kyle sat alone at the Abbott mansion, nursing the bruise on his jaw and the deeper wound in his heart. Holden, meanwhile, stood outside in the cold night air, staring into the distance, wondering how love had turned into this. Genoa City had seen its share of betrayals and heartbreaks, but this one cut deeper than most. Because sometimes the hardest lies to face are the ones we tell ourselves, and in the end, no one in this tangled triangle would ever be the same again. The air in the Grand Phoenix lobby, usually thick with the scent of expensive perfume and whispered deals, now crackled with a tension so profound it felt like the very oxygen was being leached from the room, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence that was broken only by the ragged, furious breaths emanating from Holden, whose entire world had just been violently upended by a few simple, damning words. It had started, as these cataclysmic confrontations so often do, with a veneer of civility, a brittle politeness stretched taut over the seething, unspoken knowledge that had been festering for weeks, a poison slowly working its way through the veins of their shared history. Kyle, ever the picture of a man who believed he held the winning hand, had approached with that infuriatingly confident tilt of his chin, a smirk playing on his lips that suggested he was privy to a joke that everyone else was too slow to understand, and he had launched into his well-rehearsed speech, a tapestry woven with half-truths and deliberate omissions designed to paint Holden as the villain, the obstacle, the unreasonable force standing in the way of his and Claire's happiness. He spoke of connection, of a bond so immediate and powerful it transcended their family's complicated, often bloody history. He invoked the memory of his mother, the saintly Summer, as a shield and a weapon, suggesting that this new love was a form of healing, a beautiful, unexpected redemption for all the pain the Newmans had endured, and he looked Holden dead in the eye, his voice dripping with a condescending pity as he said, "You have to understand, Holden, what Claire and I have is real. It's something you can't possibly comprehend because you're too stuck in the past, too blinded by your own grief to see that she makes me happy, that she's the best thing that's happened to me since." And he trailed off, letting the unspoken comparison to his dead mother hang in the air, a masterstroke of emotional manipulation. But Holden was not swayed. He stood his ground, a granite cliff against the relentless, smarmy tide of Kyle's rhetoric, his jaw clenched so tight it was a wonder his teeth didn't powder, his hands balled into white-knuckled fists at his sides, and he countered every point with a low, guttural growl of a voice, pointing out the insanity of it all, the sheer recklessness of bringing a woman with such direct, undeniable ties to the family's greatest tormentor into their inner sanctum, into their hearts, into the very bed that had once been shared by a Newman. "You're playing with fire, Kyle," he had warned, his voice trembling with the effort of restraint. "And you're going to burn this entire family to the ground for a pretty face and a sob story. You're disrespecting your mother's memory. You're spitting on your father's legacy, and for what? For a woman who appeared out of nowhere with a conveniently tragic past, and an even more convenient connection to the woman who tried to destroy us all." The argument escalated, their voices rising, drawing the discreet stares of the hotel staff and the few patrons lingering in the opulent space, the chandeliers above seeming to tremble with the force of their animosity, and it was then that Kyle, pushed into a corner by Holden's relentless logic and raw emotion, decided to play his trump card, the one he believed would shut down all debate, that would finally make Holden see the futility of his opposition. He puffed out his chest, the smirk returning full force, now edged with a cruel, triumphant gleam, and he said with the dramatic flourish of a man laying down a winning ace, "Well, it's a little late for your concerns, Holden. You can stand there and lecture me about the past all you want, but Claire and I, we're not just dating. We're not just in love. We're married. It's done. She's my wife." The words, "she's my wife," landed not with a whisper but with the concussive force of a bomb blast, sucking all remaining sound from the room, leaving in its wake a vacuum of pure, unadulterated shock. For a long, suspended moment, Holden did nothing, said nothing. He simply stared at Kyle as if seeing him for the first time, his face a terrifying blank canvas upon which a storm of unimaginable fury was beginning to paint itself stroke by horrifying stroke. The word wife echoed in the cavernous space of his mind, bouncing off the walls of his sanity, tearing through the fragile tapestry of family loyalty and respect that he had fought so hard to preserve. He saw in that single declarative sentence the culmination of every betrayal, every reckless act, every insult Kyle had ever levied against the Newman name, and it was all too much, the final unforgivable transgression. The careful control he had been exerting, the iron will that had kept him rooted to the spot, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. There was no thought, no conscious decision. It was a primal reaction, a raw, instinctual response to a profound and personal violation. His body moved before his mind could catch up, a coiled spring of pent-up rage finally released. His right arm drew back, muscles bunching with a lifetime of frustration and protectiveness, and then it launched forward, a piston of pure, unadulterated fury, connecting with Kyle's jaw with a sickening wet crack that was louder, more visceral, than any of their shouted words had been. It was a sound that spoke of broken bones and shattered trust, a sound that would reverberate through the halls of Newman Enterprises and the mansions of Genoa City for weeks to come. Kyle's head snapped back violently, a marionette with its strings cut, and he staggered backwards, his legs turning to liquid beneath him, his confident smirk wiped from his face and replaced with a mask of stunned, wide-eyed agony and disbelief. He crumpled to the polished marble floor, a heap of expensive suit and shattered ego, one hand flying to his already swelling jaw, his eyes swimming with a confusion that was rapidly giving way to a dawning, humiliated rage. He looked up at Holden from his undignified position on the ground, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth, and he tried to speak, to muster some form of retaliation, but all that came out was a pained, guttural gasp. Holden stood over him, his chest heaving, his knuckles throbbing with a pain that was deeply, profoundly satisfying, the physical sensation a welcome anchor in the maelstrom of his emotions. He looked down at his nephew, not with remorse, but with a cold, terrifying finality, his eyes burning with a fire that promised this was not the end, that this violent outburst was merely the opening salvo in a war that had just been declared. The onlookers, who had been frozen in a tableau of shock, now began to stir, a murmur rippling through the small crowd, but Holden paid them no mind. His entire world had narrowed to the man on the floor and the seismic truth that had just been revealed. The word wife still echoed, but now it was mingling with another, even more terrifying realization, one that had been lurking in the shadows of his mind since the moment Claire had first entered their lives. The secrecy, the rushed nature of it, the specific, almost predatory way she had inserted herself into Kyle's vulnerable life. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, crystalline clarity. This was not a simple love story. This was a calculated move, a chess play in a game they had all been playing without knowing the rules, and Kyle, the poor, lovesick fool, had walked right into the trap and handed her the keys to the kingdom on a silver platter. He took a step closer to the prone form of his nephew, his voice dropping to a low, venomous whisper that was far more frightening than his previous shouts had been, each word dripping with a contempt so pure it was almost holy. "You fool!" he hissed, the words slicing through the air like shards of glass. "You arrogant, blind, stupid fool. You think this is a love story? You think she chose you, Kyle? Out of all the men in the world, she just happened to fall for the son of Summer Newman, the grandson of Victor Newman? You married her? You stood in front of someone, probably some justice of the peace she found in a back alley, and you vowed to love and cherish the woman who is quite likely a plant, a pawn, a weapon sent from the one person who has dedicated her life to destroying our family." He leaned in even closer, his shadow falling over Kyle like a shroud. "This has Eve's fingerprints all over it. This reeks of her manipulation, her long-game poison. She couldn't get to us directly, so she sent in a Trojan horse, a pretty young, vulnerable-looking woman with a story designed to hook you, to make you feel like a savior, and you swallowed it whole. You didn't just bring her into our home. You made her family. You gave her your name. You've handed the woman who is probably working for our greatest enemy a legal claim to everything, a seat at the table, a right to know our most intimate secrets. You've jeopardized Newman Enterprises, you've put a target on your own back, and you've desecrated the memory of your mother in a way I never thought possible." The truth of Holden's words, brutal and unvarnished, began to seep through Kyle's pain and anger, the first flicker of doubt clouding his eyes. The perfect romantic narrative he had constructed for himself and Claire began to show hairline fractures under the weight of Holden's devastating logic. The coincidences he had so willingly dismissed, the small inconsistencies in her past that he had chalked up to trauma, the way she sometimes flinched at the mention of Victor's name, it all looked different now, viewed through the lens of Holden's terrifying accusation. The punch to his face was a temporary physical pain, but the verbal evisceration that followed was a deeper, more lasting injury, one that struck at the very foundation of the new reality he had built for himself. He had been so sure of his love, so certain of Claire's purity of heart, that the possibility of such an elaborate, malicious deception had never truly crossed his mind. He had been playing checkers while Eve, if Holden was right, had been playing chess, and Claire was the queen she had moved directly into his king's row. The scene left in the wake of this revelation was one of utter devastation. A quiet human ruin scattered across the gleaming impersonal luxury of the hotel lobby. Kyle remained on the floor, a broken prince in his fallen kingdom, grappling with the horrifying notion that the woman he loved, the wife he had pledged his life to, might be a phantom, a beautiful lie crafted in the deepest pits of hell for the sole purpose of finishing the job his great-grandmother had started. The physical pain in his jaw was nothing compared to the sick, twisting feeling in his gut, the first cold tendrils of a dread that threatened to consume him whole. And Holden, standing tall amidst the wreckage he had both predicted and precipitated, felt no triumph, only a cold, grim resolution.